last class we talked about up to here, no? We talked up to our steam turbines, okay, the impulse and reaction turbine. So in this class, let us start with um, just wait a second. Okay, in this class we will starting with our next part, that is our lubricating systems. Now, as you know that all the systems, all the equipments that we are using in a power station are all mechanical systems. Okay, so what happens that we need a very efficient lubricating system to keep all the equipment, specifically the gears, the bearings running, as well as to cool the equipments also. Okay, so the lubricating oil that we'll be using, that is also it is having a dual purpose of lubricating the equipment, specifically the bearings and oil, bearings and shafts, and is also uh, acting as a cooling system. It can act as a cooling system uh, also. Okay, rather we have a cooling system specifically for this one also, for all the equipments which we will be talking about in the later half of the classes. Okay, so as you can see, what it is written, that the lubricating system does not allow the turbine shaft to come to directly contact with the bearings and move the heat generated quickly during the operation. So the pressure, as you can see, a huge amount of pressure is required at around 1000 to 2000 psi's. Okay, the oil is being supplied to the turbine and the alternator bearings, because of which we obviously can understand that we will be requiring a motor, a high pressure motor for this purpose. Okay, so what are the properties? One can see the properties of lubricating oil are liable to change at a high temperature, and this should be maintained as a reasonable limit. Means whenever the temperature of that lubricating oil increases, that oil has to be removed quickly from that particular region. And this way, if there is a continuous flow of oil, what will happen, that the temperature of that bearing can be maintained at a specific temperature. Okay, so the oil lubrication should be continuous, under pressure, cool, and free from injurious foreign matters. Obviously, we can understand that if the oil also contains certain foreign matters, then it will decrease the efficiency of why it is being present in that particular system. Okay, so there are different types of high pressure oil pumps that is used in lubricating system. Let us see this ones. So number one is our jacking oil pump. Jacking oil pump, as you can see, it is written, is used at the time of starting of the turbine. Okay, when the turbine starts, at that time this GOP is required. So the GOP, which is motor driven, supplies high pressure oil that is lifting the rotor shaft from the bearings and is establishing an oil field between the rotor shaft and the bearing. Okay, before the bearing gear is put into operation. What is bearing gear? We'll be seeing just after a few slides only. Okay. Uh, so it is saying that it is services an oil film, oil field between the rotor sheet and the bearings. Okay, and that's why it prevents damage under slow running conditions. Okay, that is the function of the jacking oil pump. Slow running conditions, because during the starting of the turbine starts rotating slowly. So that's why we are talking about this uh, jacking oil pump. The next is our flushing oil pump, FOP. Okay, flushing oil pump. So here what we have, an auxiliary oil pump known as the flushing oil pump, supplies the oil for lubricating purposes during slow turning period. Okay, so this pump can also be arranged to serve as a standby turbine driven auxiliary pump. Actually, this flushing oil pump and the next one also, that is an auxiliary oil pump, all are driven by the turbine only. Okay, when the turbine is rotating slowly, so that at that time we can actually use this turbine, this flushing oil pump also. Okay, which serves as the auxiliary to this GOP. Similarly, we have an auxiliary oil pump. Okay, auxiliary oil pump, which is, as you can see, it is written that the turbine driven auxiliary oil pump supplies the lubricating oil during starting or shutting down of the turbo alternator. So it automatically cuts off operation when the turbo alternator reaches the rated speed and the main pump is supplying the oil at the proper pressure. Okay, so during the starting and the shutting down of the turbo alternator, apart from this JOP, we have this AOP also, that is auxiliary air oil pump, and it will automatically call off when the rated speed is rated. Okay, so And rated speed means obviously the alternator is reaches its synchronous speed. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. And obviously what we have, and this pump is supplying oil to the bearings while starting or shutting down of the turbo alternator, and an arrangement is made for its automatic operation in the event of failure of the main oil pump. So as you can understand that this auxiliary oil pump is acting as a backup for the main oil pump. So the main oil pump will coming into play when the turbine has started rotating through our gears. Okay, so the main oil pump is directly driven by the turbine shaft through gears, and it is supplying oil to the bearing when the turbo alternator reaches its synchronous speed. So obviously this main oil pump is obviously it is turbine driven. So the pump discharge pressure is around 50 psi, and the oil flowing through the bearings is throttled to a pressure of about 5 to 7 psi. And the oil at the pump discharge pressure is also used in the governing system to act as the motive medium for opening and closing the valves. So what valves we are talking about here? Anybody? We are talking about the steam valves. Okay, we are opening and closing the steam valves. Okay, so the oil at the pump discharge pressure is also used in the governing system to act as the main motive media for opening and closing the valves. So if the oil system fails due to any reason, the steam supply to the turbine is cut off immediately, or it is obvious for the reasons that if the oil system fails means there is no oil. So basically, if under that condition, if the turbine is operating, then there is a high chance of wear and tear in the gears and the shafts. Okay, so that's why we whenever the oil system fails, we immediately cut off the steam supply to the turbine. Okay, so that the turbine does not rotates. Understood? Okay, now we have talked about something called a barring gear, no, in the jacking oil pump section. So what is a barring gear? So please remember that whenever the unit is actually tripped, okay, the turbine will be coming to standstill after a few time. Okay, means it will be coasting towards standstill. So when it completely stops, what happens, that the turbine, there's a tendency of the turbine shaft is to deflect or warp. Why it is warping? Because the heat inside the turbine casing tends to concentrate in the top half of the casing. Okay, it tends to concentrate in the top half of the casing, thus making the top half portion of the shaft hotter than the bottom half, because of which the shaft could actually, what can happen, it can warp. Okay, warping means, I think you can understand that that it will be bending slightly. Okay, and this bend is means it is it can be only be detected by these eccentricity meters, because the warping on the bend will be by millions of inches. Okay, so this small shaft deflection is enough to cause very damaging vibrations to the entire steam turbine generator unit when it is again restarted. Okay, so the shaft is therefore automatically turned at very low speeds, that is around 1 to 2 rpms, by this barring gear until it has cooled sufficiently to permit a complete stop. I think you have understood. Okay, and what I have just said, it is all written here. Okay, so the function, what is the function of the barring gear is then? So the barring gear, this is a turning or rolling gear for slowly rotating the shaft of the turbo alternator. What are its functions? See, as main functions can be defined. So number one is to start the turbine from rest without the use of steam. That is the number one function. Next, rotate the shaft slowly when the steam has been cut off, thus preventing any permanent set or bending due to uneven contraction, which may take place if the turbo alternator is allowed to cool under stationary conditions. Third, it minimizes the possibility of shaft distortion that I was just telling you at starting due to unequal heating caused by sudden inrush of the steam, and it maintains an oil flame between the shaft journals and the bearings. It also helps to run the motor for inspection purposes. Okay, and the speed also is very, as you can see, it is written as this bearing speed is in the region of 1.5 to 2 rpms, and it trips out automatically when the speed of the turbine shaft is around 20 to 30 rpm is reached. Okay, understood? Till now, any questions? I hope not. Any questions till now?
No, sir.
Okay. So next, what we are talking about, let us talk about our fuel handling. So how can we handle the fuel? Actually, as you can see, there are 9 ways in which this fuel is being handled. So number one is our fuel delivery. So it will be by through truck, boat, or rail. Then it has to be unloaded. It may be wagon tipplers. It may be rotary car dumpers by cranes. Then the fuel has to be prepared, so it has to pass through a crusher, sizer. Means the size of the coal has to be, means the size of that coal block has to be maintained. Then it passed through dryers to remove any moisture content from the coal, and then it to pass to magnetic separators to remove any iron content, if any, inside that coal. Then it has to be transferred by belt conveyors or bucket elevators to um, our furnaces. Okay. Then we have outdoor or dead storage. So this is an insurance against complete shutdown of the power plant, which may arise from failure of normal coal delivery. So outdoor dead storage is basically for means we keep around 3 to 4 days. Okay, for sometimes more than that, but sometimes 10 days fuel is stored. Suppose the delivery is not coming, normal coal delivery is not happening. For that reason, you, we may store the coal for around 10 days. So that's why it is known as our outdoor dead storage. And similarly, we have indoor live storage, where the coal storage is for a day, and the live storage can be provided with bunkers and coal bins. Okay. Then we have our plant handling, that is, it will be using our belt conveyors or bucket conveyors to the here the bucket conveyors to our boiler furnace. And last one, it is weighing and measuring the amount of the coal. And the last one is our furnace firing. I think I some pictures of that one also here. As you can see here, this is the outdoor dead storage that we are talking about. Okay. So here the truck is dumping the coal, or we have wagon tipplers. Okay. Then we have this belt conveyors. See, the sizing has occurred, and after that we are taking this to the use of this belt conveyors or our like this bucket conveyors. Okay. So next we have our methods of fuel firing. So there are two methods of fuel firing. Number one is our solid fuel firing. Number two is our pulverized fuel firing. Okay. So if we are using solid coal blocks, then we'll be going for the solid fuel firing. And but in general nowadays we are going for this pulverized fuel firing. We'll be seeing that one later. Okay. So number one, so when we have solid fuel firing, it may be two types: hand firing and stoker firing. This hand firing is again suitable for very small plants, and here the adjustment of supply of air is required every time green coal is fed in the furnace. And then we have our stoker firing, which is again of two types: overfeed and underfeed. And when we have overfeed, it may be conveyance stoker or spreader stoker. And if it is conveyor stoker or traveling gauge stoker, then it may be two types again: chain gauge stoker or bar gauge stoker. Okay. And if it's an underfeed stoker, it will be a single retort stoker or a multi retort stoker. So let us see what it is. What is basically this overhead stoker and this underfeed stoker? So stoker firing is basically is nothing but mechanical firing. Stoker firing, here actually a large quantity of fuel can be uniformly burned. Okay. So as you can see, we have the picture for a overfit stoker. So coal is fed on the grate above the admission point of air. Okay. So what is grate? Grate is the place over which the coal is placed. Okay. So first of all, we have the grate over which the coal is placed, and from below the grate, what is happening? Air is coming. So as you can see that when the air moves to the gate, means moves to the grate and the ash layer, it gets heated up, and the grate and the ash layer becomes cooler. Okay. So in the layer of the incandescent coke, what is happening is that carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen are produced. Okay. So it needs a secondary airflow for complete combustion, as you can see. So the path of airflow can be easily defined for this overfeed stoker, as you can see, it is the air, it is passing through the grate, then it is a layer of ash, then incandescent coke, then green coal plus supplementary air, or secondary air for complete combustion, and then we have the flue gas, which is going to the boiler. So the flue gas is a mixture of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, hydrogen, means water particles, and or oxygen, and carbon monoxide if the combustion is not complete. So we generally try to make the combustion as complete as possible so that the carbon monoxide content in the flue gas decreases. Okay. Next, what we have? Next, we have our underfeed stoker. As you can see, here the coal is fed into the grate below the point of admission of the primary air. Okay. So here is the coal here. Okay, so it is below the point of admission of the primary air, and for this actually uh, bituminous and semi-bituminous coal having low is having small S content and fusing temperature above 1300 degrees centigrade can be burnt efficiently in this underfeed stoker. Okay, so here as you can see the path of airflow. So first is primary air, then the grate, then the green coal plus secondary air, then we have our incandescent coke, then the layer of ash, and last we have the flue gas tube boiler. So we can very well understand that this is the two methods by which can actually fire a typical uh, steam power plant. Okay, so I hope it is clear till now. I hope it is clear till now. Any questions till now?
Yes, sir, clear.
Okay. So the next will be, let us jump into our, I think we just finished the slide. Yes. So let us jump into the last slide, not the last slide, means for the steam power plant actually. Okay. Where now we'll be talking about our that pulverized fuel firing. No, we saw a pulverized fuel firing. So let us see that one. Let me stop this presentation and start another one. Okay. Let me, I think the slide is visible. The slide is visible. Power supply systems part 5.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so power supply systems part 5. Let us see that one. So we are talking about our methods of fuel firing. So there was two. We talked about stoker firings. Okay, now we'll talk about our pulverized fuel firing. So why the coal is pulverized? The coal is pulverized to increase its surface exposure to fire and therefore to increase the combustion rate. So what is happening means we are actually grinding the raw coal in pulverizing mills. Okay, so what does the purpose of these mills are? As I was saying that we are grinding the raw coal in pulverizing mills. So the essential functions of these mills are drying of coal, grinding, separation of particles, and forming proper air fuel ratio. If you recollect that when we're talking about the air which is coming from the forced draught fan, I told that some part of the air is going to the furnace and some part is going to the pulverizing mill, from where it is actually collecting this pulverized coal and then feeding it into the furnace. Okay, so that is so. What is happening that we'll be seeing later that we have, I think I have a picture of how this pulverizing air fan or the is actually using the air to feed the coal into the furnace. We'll be seeing that one later. Okay, so the pulverized coal is obtained by grinding raw coal in pulverizing mills. So the essential functions of these mills are obviously drying of coal, grinding of coal, separation of the particles. Means if any unwanted particles are there, this has means sometimes rocks will be also be there. Okay, so those particles has to be removed from that particular coal. Okay, forming proper air fuel ratio. So the various types of pulverizing mills are ball mill, ball and race mill, ball and hammer mill. So obviously coal gets pulverized due to the combined impact between coal and steel balls within the drum of the pulverizing mill. Okay, so I think here is the figure that I was talking about. As you can see, this is the pulverized air fan that I was talking about. Okay, so this is the pulverized air fan. So here is the air coming from the forced draught fan, and the air is going here, and it is using the and it is entering the pulverizing mill, and it is uh, taking with itself the pulverized coal and feeding into the furnace, and some part of the air, as you can see, it is going into the furnace to burn the coal, and from here the ash content is coming out. And this is a typical picture, and these are superheaters, reheaters, and economizers. These are all actually we talked about. These are all part of the boiler. Okay. I hope this figure is clear. Okay. Then what we have, the pulverized fuel system, we saw that these are two types. It is our direct system, one is unit direct system and a bin central system. So there are four types of fuel burners actually: long flame burner, turbulent burner, tangential burner, cyclone burner. We just uh, required to name them. Okay, just this slide is only for your understanding. Okay, just you can understand the what types of burners are there. So as you can see, this is the typical picture of how the burner is there. So it may be it may be a cyclone burner, it may be a turbulent burner, it may be a tangential burner, it may be a long flame burner. Okay, so here the three figures that are given. So A is basically for our long flame burner, B is for our turbulent burner, and the cyclone burner is given for our C. That tangential burner is not given here actually, so I think you can understand how it will be working. Okay, so this is the typical picture of how the burning system is occurring. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of this pulverized fuel firing? So the advantages is number one, what is happening that the surface area of the fuel is increased, which is almost 400 is to 1. Therefore, rapid combustion is possible. So due to increase in the surface area of the fuel, very small quantity of air is required for complete combustion. Low grade coal means low grade coal can be very used very efficiently since it is being used in the powdered form. The rate of feed of fuel can be regulated properly, resulting in fuel economy. Obviously, the fuel requirement will be decreasing. The rate of evaporation is increased. There will be more increased boiler efficiency. Firing of the boiler will be easy compared to our underfeed or overfeed stoker. Fluctuation of the load can be made easily, and ash removing troubles are greatly reduced. Okay. Whereas there is also a disadvantage of this pulverized fuel firing. Can you tell me what are the disadvantages? What are the disadvantages? Number
The
one
pollution.
disadvantage, nah, means number one disadvantage that is coming into our mind is our extra cost. Correct? That the pulverizing means means we have to grind the coal, no, because of which the cost this means it involves extra cost. So number one is our extra cost for this pulverizing mills. So since we are talking about high combustion temperature, so they will be causing high thermal losses in the flue gases. So there will be danger of explosion of coal as is danger of explosion as coal is burnt like a gas. So and this operating um, cost of this pulverizing plant is also high from energy utilization point of view because there will be losses to the flue gases. Okay, so the furnace temperature, unburned fuel, and the effect of ash actually deteriorates the refractory material of the furnace. Okay, and the pulverizing coal firing produces fly ash, which requires a separate fly ash removal requirement, because of which it again it will be involving extra cost. Understood? Okay, so these are the disadvantages of pulverized fuel firing. Uh, what is fly ash and how it will be taken care of? I think we will be talking that in our this slide only later off in the class. Okay, we have a typical type only. The fly ash means ash storage handling plant actually. Okay. Apart from this, we have another type of combustion that we are using nowadays, which is our FBC or the fluidized bed combustion. Okay, fluidized bed combustion. As you can see, this is a very flexible method of electrical power generation production. So most commercial material can be burned, including coal, biomass, re- and general waste. So apart from coal, biomass and general waste can be also be used for producing electricity. Okay, and that's a very efficient way of using electricity nowadays also. But again, the cost of maintaining those are means it's not cost effective. That's why it has not gained popularity in India as such. But again, it can be used. Okay, it comes under the purview of renewable energy techniques. Is renewable energy how we can use the biomass energy to generate our or it not renewable. It comes under the purview of the non-conventional energy generation sources. Okay, this biomass. Okay, so in fluidized bed combustion. Bed combustion, what is happening? So coal is burnt in a reactor comprised of a bed through which gas is fed to keep the fuel in a turbulent state. So as you can see that in the reactor, what is happening? The coal is burned through which in a bed through which gas is fed to keep the fuel in a turbulent state. Okay, so because of which this because the fuel is in this in, a, in a turbulent state, what is happening? This improves combustion, heat transfer, and the recovery of the waste. Means this improves combustion, it improves heat transfer, and also improves the recovery of the waste products. So second one, as you can see that the higher heat exchanger efficiencies and better mixing of the fluidized bed combustion systems allows them to operate at lower temperatures than the conventional pulverized coal combustion systems. Okay, and by elevating the pressures within the bed, a high pressure gas stream can be used to drive a gas turbine to generate electricity. So this particular system is actually used for our gas turbine power plants, actually this fluidized bed combustion. So so the main advantage of this fluidized bed systems, it improves the environmental impact of the coal based electricity, and it reduces the SOx and NOx emissions by around 90%. So what are the types of the FBC? There are actually two types. It is non pressurized FBC and the pressurized FBC. So non pressurized FBC, as you can see here, it is operating at the atmospheric pressure and are most widely applied type of fluidized bed combustion, and and they have efficiency similar to our pulverized coal combustion. Okay, and the pressurized FBC or the PFBC is operates at elevated pressures and produces a high pressure gas stream that can drive a gas turbine, creating a more efficient combined gas cycle generation system. Okay, so here again, this pressurized FBC actually using two types. Number one is our bubbling type. So here a low fluidizing velocity, so that the particles are held mainly in a bed, are generally used in very small power plants, offering a non-pressurized efficiency of around 30%. And then we have a circulating type, where we use a higher fluidizing velocity, so that the particles are constantly held in the flue gases. So this is generally used for our bulk power generation. Okay, so here is a typical picture of our fluidized bed combustion. As you can see, in the first one we have our mixed bed, so the fuel is entering and the air is coming from the bottom, and the combustion is taking place and the flue gas is going outside from the top half of the section. Then we have a bubbling type as in the second half, in the second picture, and a third is a circulating type. As you can see, with the there's a circulating area. So this is the circulating area that we're talking about. Okay, the circulating area that we're talking about, and the flue gas is coming out from the top half of the um, combustion area. Okay, so what is the advantage of using this flue based fluidized bed combustion? So actually what we can say that the air requirement will be very low. So lesser air requirement, as low as 10 to 15%. This is possible because of very good and vigorous mixing of coal particles and air. Then we have high heat release rate because of good mixing and efficient combustion. Okay, so there is appreciable reduction in the combustion chamber dimension. So the size of that chamber actually can be decreased. So since there is high heat transfer rate between the particles and the immersed heat exchanger surfaces, so it is estimated that as much as 40 to 50% of the total heat released can be extracted from the bed alone, and suitable for any type of coal, means coal of any grade, by maintaining a given percentage of carbon and inert material in the bed. So we can burn coal of almost any grade without affecting the performance. Also, because of lower bed temperatures, this ash fusion problems are eliminated. Ash fusion means the ash actually fuses among themselves to form huge ash blocks. That problem can be avoided. Obviously, better pollution control, as we have said, as the combustion is achieved at a temperature as low as 800 to 850 centigrade. So efficiencies of NOx is almost eliminated or kept at a minimum, and with additions like lime in the belt or sulfur in the fuel, can be removed with the ash and need not be allowed to escape with the flue gas. So the problem of NOx and SOx, that is sulfur oxides, is also removed, and it is very well suited for large scale operations. Okay, so nowadays we actually are trying to go for these fluidized based combustions because most of the power plants that we have nowadays is our this gas turbine power plants. Okay, and okay, what is the then what are the drawbacks? So obviously it is number one, it will be, as you can see from the figure, that it will be requiring a very complex coal feeding and ash handling system. Okay, it will be requiring a very complex and coal feeding and ash handling system. The thrust coal that is entering, it should be of very, it should be of particular proper size. So it will be require an auxiliary system like a gas or oil, means auxiliary starting system like a gas or oil burner. Okay, uh, so and moreover, as means it is very difficult to describe how the flow of gas and will be behaving. Okay, and that's why it is totally unpredictable, complex behavior of this uh, flow of gas, and because of which it requires extensive research and experimentation. Okay, and it is very difficult to control the carbon carryover with the flue gases, because you can understand that since we are entering the air from here and the flue gas is coming out from here, so the carbon content uh, can be high for the flue gases, and we have to control the generation also. So regulating the generation and the disposal of calcium sulfate actually are very difficult tasks. Why calcium sulfate? Because we have added lime in the bed, no? So because of this, the generation and the disposal of the calcium sulfate is also very difficult task, and there is difficulty in taking care of varying loads. Means if the load changes, then there is very then due to variable load, the operation of this fluid based combustion is very difficult to take care of. Okay, so these are the what I've said. These are all written here in the drawbacks of the fluidized bed combustion. Okay, next what we have our ash handling plants. Okay, so the dust problem is maximum in pulverized fuel firing, so that dust is separated from flue gases by the electrostatic precipitator. We have talked about it. Okay, before it exhausts to the chimney. So the ash handling process কি হচ্ছে? Removal of ash from furnace by ash hoppers, transfer of this ash to a field or storage, and disposal of the stored ash. So it may be disposed of by filling a wasteland, or building contractors may utilize it to make bricks. Nowadays, it's very common to use this ash made bricks. Okay, so as you can see that actually that we're talking about the fly ash, no? So the fly ash is a very important aspect which is contained in the flue gases, and we do not want that fly ash to come out from the chimneys. That's why we need our ESPs. Okay, and that's why we need our electrostatic precipitators. So the ash from the boiler, as you can see, is cut in two forms. It may be bottom ash slurry. This is a waste. Uh, is dumped into an ash pond. Then it may be a fly ash. It is separated from the flue gases in the electrostatic precipitator, and it may be used from the economizer also, because it reduces the temperature. Okay, when it is passing through the economizer, the heat is being exchanged to what? To the feed water, and that's why the temperature of the flue gases also reduces. Again, we have a ash handling system flow diagram, as you can see. So here we have our slurry of the ash pond. Here the fly ash silo, which is coming from our ESP economizer, air preheater. Okay, so these all the ash is collected. Okay, and then it is transferred to the or stored somewhere. Understood? Understood till now?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you recollect, if you just again recollect that layout of a typical drought system, So we had two fans, no? One is our induced draught fan and one is our forced draught. Okay. So what is this draught actually? So let us talk about that one first. Then we're talking about those ID and the FD fans separately. Okay. So when you're talking about this draught, it is nothing but to burn a fuel completely. Some conditions actually needs to be fulfilled. What are the conditions? Number one is the supply of enough air. Second, thorough mixing of the air with the fuel. Third is sufficiently high furnace temperature. Fourth is enough surface volume to provide sufficient time for completing the combustion reaction. And fifth is the quick removal of the burned product. So this is the function that has to be followed to burn a fuel completely. Okay. And what is draught then? So draught is actually the difference in pressure which facilitates the flow of air and the removal of the burnt products. Okay. So there are two types of draughts. One is our natural draught. So the draught is produced with the help of only chimney, but for huge systems, for huge power plants, we actually go for this artificial draught system. The draught is produced by any other means except chimney. So here we have three types. It may be forced draught, it may be induced draught, and it may be balanced draught. So if both FD and ID fans are present, so it is basically a balanced draught. And if it is only one fan is present, so it is a means either the atmospheric air is coming in at a means at the same pressure, at atmospheric pressure, then it is induced draught. And if it is coming at a very high pressure, then it is through the use of this forced draught. Okay. So when you let us talk about this one then, so let us talk about the natural draught first, which is also known as our chimney draught. Okay. So as you can see, it is written that the chimney draught or the natural draught is produced by the chimney is due to the temperature difference of hot gases in the chimney and the cold air outside the chimney. Okay. It is due to the temperature difference of hot gases in the chimney and cold air outside the chimney. Okay. So we have taken, as you can see, we have taken the H is the height of the chimney above the grate level. Anybody, what is the grate level? I have told just few minutes back only. What is the grate level? What do you mean by grate level? Anybody? Grate level? Grate is basically the place where the coal is
Coal is
placed.
kept.
Okay.
Pulverized coal is placed.
Yes. Okay, that is our grate. Okay, I think that figure in the understood and the overfeed and the underfeed stoker you have seen. I have shown you the grate also. Okay, so the grate is the place where actually that coal or the fuel is being placed. Okay, so let H, as you can see, height of the chimney above the grate level, and PA is the atmospheric pressure, WA is the weight density of the atmospheric air, WG is the weight density of hot gases passing through the chimney. So the pressure acting on the grate from the chimney side is basically equal to P1, which is equal to PA plus WG into capital H, and pressure acting on the grate at the atmospheric side is P2, which is equal to PA plus WA plus H. So the net acting pressure on the grate is P2 minus P1. Okay, so P2 minus P1 is equal to WA minus WG into H. Okay. So please note what we can see, that this difference in pressure is actually responsible for causing the flow of air through the combustion chamber. Okay. So how can we means increase the acting pressure? So the acting pressure can be increased either by increasing the height of the chimney or by reducing the density of the hot gases, by allowing the hot gases to go out of the furnace at higher temperature. So if the hot gas is going out of the temperature at a higher temperature, so what will happen? That the density of the gases will be decreasing. If that is the case, the active pressure on this chimney draught can be increased. So what is the advantages? Advantages is no. Okay, so advantages is no external power is required, a very less capital investment, and the release of flue gases at a certain height. Therefore, contamination of air is very less. Whereas the limitations are, that is, the available draught decreases with increase in outside air temperature, resulting in the overall loss of the overall plant efficiency. Okay, and there is no thorough mixing of fuel and the air in the combustion chamber due to the low velocity of air, and therefore the combustion is very very poor. Okay, so this increases the fuel consumption. Okay, these are the disadvantages or or the limitations of a chimney draught. Okay, now let us talk about the first one, that is the induced draught. Okay, if you recollect where the induced draught was placed, induced draught কোথায় ইনস্টল করা ছিল, ওই লেআউটটা যদি মনে থাকে তো, induced draught was installed
চিমনির আগে
chimney age, correct, is it the induced draught fan is installed near the base of the chimney, as you can see from the figure here. Okay, so as you can see the air is being sucked in by reducing the pressure through the system below atmosphere. মানে আইডি ফ্যানের কাজটা কি, পুরো সিস্টেমে যে প্রেসারটাকে, সে প্রেসারটাকে জাস্ট বিলো অ্যাটমসফিয়ারিক প্রেসারে করে দেওয়া। So the suction head is produced by the ID fan and depends upon the draught requirement. So after the drop in the flue, furnace and the economizer etc., finally a suction head should be available to draw in air through the coal bed, as you can see. So the draught is independent of the hot column of air in the chimney. Therefore, the gases may be let out as cold as possible, of course much above the dew point when the condensation may start, after recovering as much heat as possible. Okay, I think যে লেখাগুলো আছে এবং যেটা বললাম একই জিনিসই বললাম, I think you can understand. বুঝছো? Very simple কি করছে, I hope everybody understands Bengali. ওকে, একটু বাংলায় বলছি। আইডি ফ্যানের কাজ হচ্ছে পুরো সিস্টেমের মধ্যে একটা নেগেটিভ প্রেসার তৈরি করা। নেগেটিভ প্রেসার যখন তৈরি করছে, so automatically atmospheric more amount of atmospheric pressure, because of atmospheric pressure, more amount of air will be flowing to the furnace and through the grate, and there will be much more mixing of the fuel and the air, and so the gases can be coming out from the chimney very low temperature, means compared to what was coming out from our চিমনি ড্রট, এখানে কিন্তু প্রেসারটা অনেক কম করেই আমরা এই টেম্পারেচারটা কিন্তু অনেকটাই আমরা রিকভার করতে পারছি। কার থ্রুতে রিকভার করছি? অবভিয়াসলি থ্রু দ্য ইউজ অফ দিস economizer, superheater, reheaters, air preheaters and so on. Okay, so as you can see, then what is the function of the chimney in this ID fan? So obviously the function of the chimney in this induced draught is to dispose of the hazardous smoke and the gases high up in the atmosphere, as rules pertaining to smoke nuisance require. Okay, so the height of the chimney is not very much in these induced draught cases. Okay, so it is just the function of the chimney is to dispose of the hazardous smoke and gases high up in the atmosphere as per the rules, and it is not used for developing any draught. Understood? Okay, so next what we had our forced draught. Forced draught কি হচ্ছে? So এই forced draught কোথায় ছিল ফ্যানটা? Forced draught কোথায় ইউজ করছি? Forced draught the blower of the FD fan is installed near the base of the furnace. Okay, and air is forced to flow through the system. So here, as you can see, that air is forced through the system which is just above the atmospheric pressure. Okay, so air is forced to pass to the furnace, economizer, air preheater, and finally to the stack of the chimney. And this draught system is also called positive draught system because the pressure of air throughout the system is above atmospheric. Okay, so can you tell me what is the difficulty in using either the FD or the ID alone? যদি আমরা শুধু এফডি ফ্যান বা আইডি ফ্যান দিয়ে শুধু সিস্টেমটা ইউজ করতাম, তাহলে কি প্রবলেম হতো বলো তো? কে বলতে পারবে? কে বলতে পারবে?
কোয়েশ্চেন মানে
কোশ্চেনটা
হুম।
বলছি যে শুধু যদি এফডি ফ্যান বা আইডি ফ্যান ইউজ করতাম, ঠিক আছে, ইফ যদি শুধু অনলি এফডি ফ্যান ইউজ করতাম বা শুধু আইডি ফ্যান ইউজ করতাম, ঠিক আছে, তাহলে প্রবলেমটা কি আসতো?
স্টেডি ফ্লো অফ এয়ার হতো না।
স্টাডি এ ফ্লোর অফ এয়ার।
মানে এখানে যেমন আমরা ফ্লো গ্রেডে ঠেলছি একদিকে, আবার আইডি দিয়ে আমরা সেটাকে বার করছি।
না,
মানে
আমি সেটাই বলছি, এফডি আর আইডি কে তুমি একটা ইউজ করছো, আইদার এফডি ইউজ করছো বা আইদার আইডি ইউজ করছো। ইউ আর ইউজিং আইদার এফডি ফ্যান, ওকে, or either our you are using either FD fan or you are using this ID fan. তাহলে কি প্রবলেম হতো? What was the problem? What can be the problem? শুধু আইডি ফ্যান যদি ইউজ করো আর শুধু এফডি ফ্যান যদি ইউজ করো, what is the problem? Okay, ছবিটা যদি দেখো, so the what is the difficulty actually? The difficulty is that the furnace cannot be opened either for inspection or firing. Okay, the furnace cannot be opened either for firing or inspection. না কেন বলছি? খেয়াল করে দেখো, if the FD fan is used alone, okay, the furnace cannot be opened either for firing or inspection because the high pressure air inside the furnace will try to blow out suddenly, and there is every chance of blowing out the fire completely and the furnace stops. Understood what I have said? আমি আবার বলছি, যখনই তুমি ফায়ারিং অর ইন্সপেকশনের জন্য ফার্নেসটাকে ওপেন করছো, তাহলে তখন কি হচ্ছে? there is high pressure, no? So the high pressure air inside the furnace will try to blow out suddenly, and there is every chance of blowing out the fire completely and the furnace stops. ছবিটা দেখো, তুমি যখনই এখানে ফার্নেসটা খুলবে, তো কি আছে এখানে? তো তোমার কি আছে? তোমার ভেতরে প্রেসার তো অ্যাটমসফিয়ারিক প্রেসার থেকে বেশি আছে, তাই তো? তুমি ইন্সপেকশনের জন্য বা তুমি যখন ফায়ারিং এর জন্য ফার্নেসটাকে ওপেন করছো, ভেতরের যে হাওয়াটা সেটা বাইরে আসবে, কারণ বাইরে তো অ্যাটমসফিয়ারিক প্রেসার। আন্ডারস্টুড? সিস্টেমের ভেতরে তো মোর দ্যান atmospheric pressure, it is above the atmospheric pressure. So what will happen? The furnace will try to blow out, means it will uh, blow out। যখনই করবে তার মানে কি, ফায়ারটা তোমার নিভে যাওয়ার চান্স থাকছে, the fire will be blowing out. Understood what I am saying? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay, ফার্নেসটা যখন whenever you're opening the furnace, সাপোজ ইমাজিন করো তোমার সামনের যেটা আছে সেটা হচ্ছে ভেতরে প্রেসার, যে তোমার সামনে যে সিস্টেমটা আছে ওটা প্রেসারটা বেশি। তুমি তো অ্যাটমসফিয়ার প্রেসার আছো, তুমি যখনই সামনে সিস্টেমের মানে একটা সিস্টেমকে ওপেন করছো, সাপোজ ভাবো তোমার সামনে ফার্নেস আছে, ওটাকে যেটা তুমি ওপেন করছো টু ইন্সপেক্ট অর ফর ফায়ারিং, সো দ্যাট এয়ার উইল বি কামিং আউট, কারেক্ট? It will be coming towards you because the pressure inside that furnace is above the atmospheric pressure. I hope you can
Yes.
understand now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there is a chance of the fire blowing out, correct? The same way we can say the same type, the same type of problem we will be finding for our ID dot also. Just see the figure of the ID dot and tell me why we are saying that for the ID dot also there's a chance. There's means for the ID dot also the furnace cannot be opened either for firing or inspection. Just see the figure and tell me why in the for ID dot also we are saying that the furnace cannot be opened either for firing or for inspection.
Because if we open the pressure, there will be a pressure difference,
Why there will be pressure difference?
because ID is sucking up, providing negative pressure.
Yes,
So
means it is below the atmospheric pressure.
yes,
The
yes,
pressure inside the furnace is below the atmospheric pressure. So whenever you are opening the furnace either for firing or for inspection, so what will happen? The cold air will be trying to rush into the furnace, correct?
yes, sir.
Okay, cold air will try to rush into the furnace, and when it is when it is rushing into the furnace, so what will happen? Then again there is a chance of the fire completely blowing out. Okay, so this actually reduces the draught and it dilutes the combustion. So and there is a chance of the fire completely blowing out. That's why the furnace cannot be opened either for firing or inspection in FD or ID alone, means in forced draught or induced draught alone. That's why we need a combination of both, which is known as our balanced draught. Okay, so here what does the function of the balanced draught do? The first one is our forced draught overcomes the resistance of the fuel bed. Therefore, sufficient air is supplied to the fuel hover, okay, to the fuel bed for proper and complete combustion. And what is the function of the ID fan then? The induced draught fan will be removing the gases from the furnace, maintaining the pressure in the furnace just below the atmospheric pressure. ওকে, তাহলে গ্রেটের ঠিক তুমি যদি গ্রেটটা ভাবো, গ্রেটের নিচে অবধি আমার প্রেসারটা অ্যাবভ অ্যাটমসফেরিক, ঠিক গ্রেটের ওপরের প্রেসারটা কি হচ্ছে বিলো অ্যাটমসফেরিক. So what will happen? This helps to prevent blow off of flame when the furnace doors are opened as the leakage of air is inward. ওকে, এয়ারটা সবসময় ভেতর দিকে যাওয়ার চেষ্টা করবে। তার জন্য কি হবে, মানে এফডি তে কি হচ্ছিল যে ফ্যানটা বাইরের দিকে আসছিল, সেই জিনিসটা হচ্ছে না। সো there is a combination of both the FD and the ID. Okay, so what is the pressure inside the furnace? The pressure inside the furnace is near atmospheric but not atmospheric. Hence there is no danger of blowout of the flames. Okay, there is no danger of blowout of the flames. Understood? Okay, so let us see the figure here. As you can see, this is the variation in pressure of air or flue gases in the balanced draught. So first of all we have our FD, that is the forced draught inlet pressure. This is the forced draught fan outlet pressure. So inlet it was atmospheric pressure, now it is above the atmospheric pressure. Then we have pressure below the grate. This is the pressure above the grate. If this is the grate we are saying, so this is the pressure below the grate. Just above the grate it is negative pressure or just below the atmospheric pressure. The pressure loss is occurring inside the superheater, air preheater, preheaters. Okay, and then this is the induced draught fan inlet pressure and the induced draught fan outlet pressure, that is again in atmospheric pressure, and we have the chimney from after the ID fan, correct? So in balanced draught what is happening? As you can see that the pressure below the grate is above atmospheric and it helps for proper and uniform combustion of the fuel. Okay, then the FD fans push the atmospheric air through the air preheater, dampers, various ducts and burners into the furnace. The pressure above the grate is below atmospheric, and it helps to remove the exhaust gases as quickly as possible from the combustion zone. The ID fans push the combustion gases from the furnace throughout heat transfer taking place, uh, through the heat transfer surfaces in the superheater, reheater, economizer and gas side air preheater, and lastly into the chimney. So the chimney is acting as a natural driving pressure of its own because of its height. Okay. So the furnace in this case is said to operate with balanced draught, meaning that the pressure in it is approximately atmospheric pressure. Okay. Actually, it is kept at a slightly negative pressure to ensure that any leakage would be inward and not outside. Okay. So in general configuration, fans with backward curved blades are used for FD fans, and with flat or inward means or forward curved blades for our ID fans. Okay. Obviously, we know that the releasing temperature of flue gases should not be very low in case of our uh, artificial draughts. Okay. So I think এত অবধি বোঝা গেছে? এত অবধি বোঝা গেছে তো?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So next in line we have our governing system actually. So governing system, what happens that a turbo alternator requires to operate at constant speed. আমরা কি বলছি? It is running at a synchronous speed. No, that is a constant speed. So the governing system senses the turbine speed response and admits more steam when the turbine speed drops and vice versa. So here the governing system is actually a fly ball governor system. I think we have a figure later on. We'll be seeing that. Okay. So what is happening that if the governing system fails for any reason, the steam to the turbine must be immediately cut off. So what is happening? Actually, we can think of the system in this way. So whenever there is a increase in load, okay, so it means increase in load means আমার বা আমি এভাবে বলতে পারি যে suppose we have to supply um, more amount of steam, means we have to supply more amount of electricity to a particular load. So if there is an increase in load, so initially what is happening? Initially that increase in load is supplied from the stored kinetic energy of the generator rotor. Okay. So if that is the case, then since initially the load is being supplied, means the increased load is supplied from the stored kinetic energy of the generator rotor, so the speed of the rotor will be decreasing. If the speed of the rotor is decreasing, that is sensed by the flywheel governor mechanism. Okay. And that will be and that decrease in speed will be sensed by the flywheel governor mechanism. And what it will be doing, it will be then through a system of mechanisms, it will be allowing more amount of steam, means it will be opening the steam valve so that more amount of steam can be going to the our turbine blades, because of which the turbine will be rotating faster, because of which again if the turbine is rotating faster, means more amount of power would be generated, so that increase in load can be easily met by increased in generation. Understood what I've said? I hope you have understood. Okay. So that is how the governing system works, means it will be sensing any change in the speed of the governor rotor. Okay. Means governor rotor means obviously the turbine drop or increase in the turbine speed. Okay. So if the turbine speed increases, then it has to decrease the means it has to decrease the steam flow, because of which the means the valve will be, or the steam valve will be closing, and if it is and if more steam is required, then the governor will be sensing it, and then it will be allowing more amount of steam to pass to the turbine. Okay, this is the function of the governing system. Then we have the electrical equipments. So the electrical equipments, what are equipments in a typical power plant? So these electrical, most of means all these electrical equipments are actually in the switch yard of a typical power station. Okay, so what are the equipments? So first is means apart from this transformers, means from the transformer, circuit breaker, isolator, and reactor, all are present in the switch yard. So those switch yard here is another part, but it doesn't comes under the purview of electrical equipments. Rather, it is the place where all these equipments are actually placed. Okay, so inside the power plant, we have inside the power plant building actually we have our alternator, we have our exciter, and uh, from and we have the voltage regulator. From there we have our this transformer, and from the transformers we have our circuit breakers, isolators, and also the reactors if present, and then it is going to our transmission lines. Okay, so what is the alternators here? So the alternator is driven by a steam turbine. So the please remember there are actually two types of alternators. One is our cylindrical rotor synchronous generator. Okay, alternator means synchronous generator. Okay, alternator means synchronous generator. So there are two types of alternators. For steam power plants, we are using turbo alternators, also known as our cylindrical rotor synchronous generators. Okay, and for for hydroelectric power plants, we are using our salient pole rotor synchronous generators. Okay, so the alternator is driven by steam turbine. There is the steam turbine is the prime mover and runs at synchronous speed. Uh, and how the speed is determined? It is determined by N is equal to 120 F by P, which you will be studying in your uh, uh, machine classes actually. Okay, I think you have also studied that one. And we have the turbo alternators. So turbo alternators have generally two-pole cylindrical rotors, and since it is two-pole, so in place of F is 50 and in place of P we replace 2, it comes to be around 3000 rpm. Okay, and these turbo alternators are high speed machines having high axial length and small rotor diameter. So in the right hand side we have a cylindrical rotor synchronous generator, cylindrical rotor type alternators. Okay, I think I have a picture. Okay, I will be showing you a picture of these alternators after the class is over. Okay, and the rotation of the synchronous generator, this is the equation. So it is N is the rotor speed of the machine. So N equal to 120 F by P. F is the electrical frequency. So these steam turbines are most efficient when rotating at a very high speed, and the water turbines are most efficient when rotating at low speeds. So that's why water turbines are using our that salient pole rotor type alternators, and our steam turbines are using this cylindrical rotor type synchronous generators. Okay, this is the typical synchronous generator where we have the pole and the is two-pole rotor, and this is the armature where the generated voltage is being generated. The generated voltage that is being generated is around 11 kV, and that has to be boosted up, and that's where comes the function of our transformers, where we are boosting the voltage from 11 kV to around 132 kV. Okay, around 132 kV or whatever be the case, depending upon the type of transmission line we are using. So as you can see, please remember that this rotor is where the field circuit is. So here we have the excitation voltage, which is which is nothing but the exciter that we are talking about. So the exciter is actually uh, so the exciter is actually a means, or the we can say that the rotor excitation is provided by main and pilot exciters. Okay, so please remember these main and pilot exciters are again mounted on the same shaft. Okay, and this DC excitation system that we are seeing, this DC excitation system is required to feed the necessary field current to the rotor winding of the alternator. Okay, I think we have written here also. Okay, that the DC excitation system is required to feed the necessary field current to the rotor winding of the alternator, and this excitation system must be quite easy to control and and also a very smart response, because later on in your third year classes we'll be seeing that this excitation system is actually controlling the reactive power flow from the synchronous generator. Okay, so the reliability of this excitation system is of very importance, uh, is of utmost importance, we can say, because if there is loss of excitation, then there will lead to serious disturbances of the bus bars. Okay, so now let us talk about the alternator also. So the alternator operation, what is happening? So the rotor is producing the the rotor produces the magnetic flux. It is supplied by the DC acceleration, which I was talking about, from the exciter, which is mounted on the same turbine shaft, and the stator carries the armature winding where the EMF is induced. And please remember that depending upon the design of the alternator, the generated voltage that is being produced at the stator of the means at the armature or the stator of the synchronous generator is sinusoidal. Okay, it is sinusoidal. Okay, and how the alternators are cooled? So smaller alternators are actually air cooled, but as the size increases, more elaborate cooling will be required, and because of which seal type units with circulating hydrogen gas is employed for the purpose of cooling. Okay, and still larger units employ both hydrogen and water cooling. So the stator conductors are built with hollow strands through which this purified water is circulated to keep the temperature low. Okay, and the excitation system that I was talking about, here again it is written. So it is needed to feed the necessary field current to the rotor winding of the alternator. And please remember there are actually two types. It may be the excitation system is of two types. It is the main exciter and the pilot exciter. Okay, and we have nowadays we also use a thyristerized full wave bridge rectifiers, which are being employed as static exciters also. Okay, instead of this main and pilot exciters. Then we have voltage regulators. So obviously the function of the voltage regulator, as you can understand, that is controls the current delivered by the excitation system so as to maintain the terminal voltage of the alternator within specified limits. So actually there are three, we can define the functions of voltage regulator in three types. This number one is to keep the AC output voltage of the alternator within the specified limits. Second, we can say that that the voltage regulator is required for proper sharing of reactive power between alternators operating in parallel. Okay, and the third one is to suppress Ferranti effect. Anybody, what is Ferranti effect? Ferranti effect is basically the effect where if we have a typical transmission line, so because of low load at the receiving end, what can happen that the voltage at the receiving end can increase. Okay, so the voltage regulators are there to means if the voltage at the receiving end is more than the sending end for a typical transmission line, so that is what is known as a Ferranti effect. The voltage regulators can be used to suppress the Ferranti effect. Then what we have transformers. As you can see, the transformer steps of the generator voltage from 11 kV to the transmission level voltage, maybe 132, 220 or 440 kV, and for transmission at or above 400 kV, what we are using that the phases are housed in individual tanks as in single phase transformers, and there are other auxiliary transformers also to supply power to the station auxiliaries means we have auxiliary plants in the system, no? That is to power them will be requiring this auxiliary transformers. Okay, then we have our reactors. As you can see, what type of reactors are we have stated. So the reactors are sometimes connected in series with the alternators to limit the short circuit current for preventing damage to the equipment. Okay, due to large short circuit currents. So what is a reactor is uh, so it is nine means it is nothing but reactor is an okay. So yes, so reactor is an iron core coil having very large inductive reactance. Okay, so reactor is an iron core coil having very large inductive reactance as compared to its ohmic resistance. Okay, and because of which, so whenever there is a short circuit current flowing through an alternator, so the function of the reactors is to limit this short circuit current within the safe limit to prevent damage to the system. Okay, next what we have our circuit breakers. Actually, the next slide, yes, a circuit breaker. So a circuit breaker with an isolator on its either side is employed for switching the alternator in or out of the system. So the circuit breaker is capable of making or breaking the making and breaking an electrical network during normal operation, and it can switch off a circuit automatically in the event of a fault. And obviously it's a very costly piece of apparatus, whereas an isolator operates under no load condition only. That is, it has to be closed before the associated circuit breaker is closed and opened only after the circuit breaker has opened the circuit. Okay, means there should not be any current. That's why it is saying that this it operates under no load condition only, means there should not be any current when the isolator is opened. Okay, and please remember the switchyard that I was saying. Again, the switchyard is the place adjacent to the powerhouse where the transformers, circuit breakers, isolators, bus bars, current transformers, potential transformers, lightning arresters, and the current limiting reactants and other equipments installed. There are two types of switchyard. It may be outdoor type switchyard, which is employed for a thermal power plant, and it may be an indoor type, which is present for some hydel power plants. I hope it is clear till now. Yes, it is clear.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and last but not the least for today, we have our monitoring system and our battery supplied emergency lightning communication. So monitoring and alarm system is that most of the power plant operation controls are automatic. So obviously at times manual intervention may be required, and thus the plant is provided with monitors and alarm systems. Okay, that alert the plant operators when certain operating parameters are seriously deviating from the normal range. That is what a monitoring or alarm system does. And the battery supplied emergency lightning communication. So what is happening? A central battery system consisting of lead acid cell units is provided to supply emergency electric power when needed to to essential items such as power plants, control systems, communication systems, turbine, lube, oil pumps, circuit breaker, trip coil, and emergency lighting. So this is essential for safe damage-free shutdown of the units in an emergency situation. Actually, what is happening that we are using the power from that is being generated in the power plant to operate the batteries at a floating charge. Okay, so the batteries are always being charged. So whenever there is some fault in any part of the power plant, because of which there is power off. So these systems, basically the communication system, the power plant's control system, the circuit breaker, trip coil, our relays, okay, all would be requiring battery, means all would be supplied through this emergency battery system. Okay, please remember that the circuit breakers that we talked about in the last slide actually is being fired through the use of this relays. So what happens whenever there is a fault, that fault is sensed by the relay, and that relay will be tripping the circuit breaker. Okay, This is how actually the circuit breakers and the relays works. Please remember that I will be talking about all the equipments that we have studied here, okay, in our this 4 year classes. So you're in second year, so within this 3 year, everything will be taught to you, okay. Each and every aspect will be taught to you, starting from the alternators to the exciters to the transformers, circuit breakers, relays, everything will be taught to you. So you need not worry that okay sir, I cannot understand how it is working. We'll be talking about it in the later half of your syllabuses. Understood? Okay. So with this, we let us finish our class here itself. We have a few slides left only of this one, and then after completing it, we'll be jumping into our idle power stations. Okay. So with this, we finish our class today.